threat into the Midwestern horizon. It was roads similar to this that inspired the early engineers of the United States to create the big, noisy V-twin motorcycle. Like the cowboys of the Wild West, who sat low and easy in their saddles, the American motorcyclist mount is designed for cruising long and straight across the prairies. The lazy beat of these machines has thumped alongside American history for the last 90 years.
The motorcycle society has a bad image. We've learned just to pretty much brush it off. We don't care. It doesn't, what other people think of us just doesn't affect us.
You wanted to know the difference between Harleys and the rest of the bikes? It's like going out with a pack. The ride is probably real good, but you wouldn't want nobody to see you doing it.
Just slow down, calm down. We also have at the top of your helmet. That means the law enforcement officials are nearby.
It's worse than any drug. They have no cure. They've got Alcoholics Anonymous and they got Drugs Anonymous, but they don't have a Motorcycles Anonymous. There's no place that we can go and get well.
They're the last of a dinosaur breed. You know, they're a big monster motorcycle. As I said, they're over-engineered, they're heavy, but they certainly work. Harleys are farm tractors, you know, and that's how I feel about it. This is my buffer. This is what he rides. This is what turns his clock. 47 knucklehead. Most bikes that were built, very few of them, once they got home, stayed original. Because like you got it home, like I said, you lived on the farm. You got it home. Okay, the front's all muddy and stuff. So you took off the front fender because the front fender usually loaded up with mud. You know, sure, it kept the dirt off you a little bit, but you still got it splashed up, you know. So they started taking pieces off. They took the exhaust system off and made straighter pipes so that they would run, a lot cleaner, a lot better, sharper, faster. You know, once people started doing the machines, then they started the single cylinders, then they went to the double cylinder, the twins, you know, for speed, bigger CC, get around better. You know, these old bikes, very, very rarely do you find one that's completely stock.
We're from Colorado, so we wanted the Western natural style. We put a lot of designs we like, the oak leaves, and that's a 6-point elk picture on there. This is the fallen off button off of an elk that's shed its antler. We have Western style chaps that we wear, and we like the West. I think it's the substitute for a horse. It's the best we can do and get around a lot faster.
Getting around faster than a horse was what William Harley and Arthur Davidson were trying to achieve when they started making motorcycles in 1903. Their factory was a shed at the bottom of Davidson's garden. By 1910, they were producing 3,000 bikes a year in a proper factory in Juneau Avenue, Milwaukee, now the headquarters of Harley-Davidson. In those early days, Harley and Davidson were in competition with over 200 motorcycle makers. Names like Redding Standard, Wagner, Hudson and Flying Merkle all stopped production after a few short years. But it was this melting pot of ideas and engineers that helped kickstart America's modern industry.
These are racing bikes. Merkle made racing bikes, and then they went into the civilian business and made civilian motorcycles, and then they even took some of their civilians and made them into racers. Well, these were probably designed for the upper class type people, richer people. You know, most guys went and bought Indians and Harleys, but some of the guys went and bought the expensive bikes like the Thors and the Merkles and the Emblems and Cyclones. And they were way ahead of their time. Nowadays, in the new Harley Davidsons, we're putting dual spark plugs on them now, and we just started about 4 or 5 years ago, and this has had dual spark plugs all its life.
The Merkel ran off a mixture of pure alcohol and oil. 2 plugs per cylinder ensured that at least one plug fired if the other oiled up.
The actual relationship with the pistons and the crank and all that stuff is way advanced. Harley they took the geometry on a Harley motor and they screwed it all up to get it in the frame so people can run it. These guys didn't care about that. They made it geometrically correct to begin with, and that's why they were good.
The geometry of a V-twin can vary, but 2 cylinders set in V formation characterizes the American motorcycle. With their love of big engines, Americans often say there's no substitute for cubic inches, and the V-twin format, 1 cylinder behind the other, enables engineers to give the motorcycle a large cubic capacity whilst retaining a narrow profile. The Fileback Limited was another large capacity V-twin.
Well, it's a 1914 Limited that was manufactured by Fileback Motor Company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 1914. We only know of about 3 examples in this country of this motorcycle. It's 79 cubic inches, which is quite large for the period. They completely made all the castings and everything. Now, I have to think because I've got several of these and you have to go through a mental checklist. This one is too difficult to try and push it off a compression. You notice I bent this pedal. So we start it there and full decompress it. And then we'll gingerly pedal it and let out the compression. We'll see if she goes.
Milwaukee was famous for beer and motorcycles, both product of the German and Dutch immigrants who settled there. The Fileback shock-absorbing rubber hand grips were a crude but effective antidote to engine vibration and the poor roads of the time.
Oh, petrol valve is on. We do this again.
Oh yeah, we got something here. What is it? Looks like all
Up to 1914, Harley-Davidson's greatest competitor was the much bigger Massachusetts company Indian. During the First World War, Indian became a major supplier to the army, while Harley's aggressive marketing took advantage of the neglected home market. By the time this 1919 Indian was in the shops, the arrival of Ford's Model T had decimated the motorcycle industry, leaving Harley and Indian the leading manufacturers. With a car costing a little more than an Indian and sidecar, the people who bought motorcycles did so because they were fun to ride. Henderson and Excelsior, made by the Schwinn Bicycle Company, survived until the Depression of the 30s. The Henderson Inline 4 is often described as the Cadillac of American motorcycles.
First thing I'm going to do to start this 1927 Henderson is to choke it. Full choke. Hold the kill switch down, kick it through one time. Then I'll close my choke about halfway, back off on my throttle, and kick it through. Yes, what I've got, this outside lever is reverse gear if you have a sidecar and you want to back up. The inside gear is my shift gear. What I'll do is to press the clutch and slide the lever into first gear. All right, it's now in gear, and I'll ease off on the clutch, and I'll be underway.
You'll see a lot of engineers changing companies throughout those early years, and it's just like it is today. Big companies buy little companies' brains, and in a sense, that's really what made Harley and Indian, is all the different breeds together. Ideas from each one made the Harley and the Indian.
The American public's fascination for speed and excitement gave Indian and Harley another platform to sell bikes. Every small town had its own board track, dirt track or hill climb. In the early days, the lack of rules and regulations added to the excitement and danger.
Well, this is what is known as an outlaw machine. First of all, it's a Class A motorcycle. It is a pure racing motorcycle. This machine is a special. It's actually a machine that evolved. The honest thing to do would be to find out the very last day it raced and call it a 4th of July 1937 or something like that, because a racing machine was constantly being changed. Sometime after 1934, but before 1937, it was painted orange and green. This man who raced this machine was put in the insane asylum right before World War II. His statement was, this was a violent machine to ride. It was like the Orangeman and the Irishman who would never get along together. The engine will smooth out at approximately 15 miles an hour, and from there to 90 or 100 miles an hour on one speed. You really didn't need a transmission because it's such a very broad power range. If you really study this motorcycle, the whole motorcycle's crooked. But it's crooked in the way that it turns in the same direction all the time, and it's very controllable. I'm amazed how docile it is. The term outlaw doesn't mean you rob banks. It means you don't have any rules.
Every Thanksgiving, Harley dealer Bill Sheetinger had a motorcycle run starting outside his shop in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He took these shots just a few weeks before the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941. The Second World War was to be the deciding factor as to which of the two remaining motorcycle manufacturers of America would survive. Galloping lope of an old V-twin running requires a constant ear to the grapevine of small businesses who can supply the vital organs that will keep the bikes alive.
I believe they're WR bottom end with a KI top end. That's what I was told out in Davenport. 200 for the set.
By buying up old stock from Harley and Indian dealers, Rat Shirk and Mike Hebert have a hoard of original parts that attract customers from all over the world. Indian and Harley each have a loyal following of supporters with differing views as to which is the better company and motorcycle.
Indian was crude. As far, I hate to use those terms, but that's the only thing that comes to mind. Instead of using a bracket that's spring-loaded and will accept vibration, they just made it heavier. Harley is all, if you look at a Harley horn, there's probably 15 pieces just to put a Harley horn together on a bike. It's all spring-loaded and shock-absorbent. To resist fatigue cracking. Harley is a much nicer product. I think it's just better engineered.
I think Indians were always far more superior than Harley. Indian usually had stuff a long time before Harley did. Indian started with suspension in the rear in 1940. Harley, it was like 57 or 58. Indian always sold a lot of bikes to the police departments. The biggest percentage of police officers were right-handed. So Indian always went with the process, if they used the throttle on the left, that way the officer could pull his service revolver and keep firing with the right while he was chasing somebody, because he still had his aiming hand or whatever on the right.
This four-cylinder Indian was beautiful, but complex to produce.
But even as far as even being smooth, even if you have your hand on there, that's about 50 miles an hour.
The trouble was that for a few dollars more, you could have 4 cylinders, a roof over your head, and take the family along too in a shiny new Ford. The four-cylinder motorcycle was a rich man's plaything.
They never really said why they discontinued it. I think money-wise, that was an expensive motorcycle. Even in 1936, the Indian 4 sold for like $420. Which a lot of Fords were $500-600 for a full-size Ford automobile. So it was kind of like the exclusive motorcycle. And I'd say price is what hurt them.
Perhaps the most famous Indian is the Chief.
This is a 1936 74 cubic inch Chief with the correct sidecar at that time, what they called the Princess sidecar. E. Paul DuPont, the president of the DuPont Paint Company, was also the president of Indian. So even like in 1936, they had 12 or 15 standard color combinations, but for $3.50 extra, they'd paint it any other color you wanted if it was available in DuPont paint.
Diversification and product variety were to contribute to Indian's downfall.
The interchangeability of parts is very limited on Indians. If you look at an Indian parts book, I think there was probably 14 different sets of gas tanks from 1937 up until 42 for their different models. Harley had 3 different sets of gas tanks for their models. Indian, they put too many changes, trying to update, upgrade, and they never did it. I think they just made things worse. It seems where Harley, they designed a part, if it worked very well, they kept it. The same ignition switch from 36 right up until the late 60s. Nice switch, worked. Very simple, foolproof.
Indian really suffered during the Depression, and after that, the war started bringing them back, but their tooling and stuff was in pretty bad shape, and they kept putting a lot of money back that they were making for post-war improvements, but they weren't getting the bikes done near as fast as what they should have been. And towards the end of the war, the government actually shafted them because they said we don't need any more motorcycles and didn't buy the rest of the military bikes that they had contracted to buy or the parts.
While Indian's inefficient management failed to meet government deadlines, Harley's supply of simple and reliable machines set them up for the post-war boom.
In 1945, with the shortages of war material, you couldn't even buy a motorcycle from a dealer. To get one, you actually went before a war production board and had to prove that you needed it. It was either a police department, civil defense, or essential transportation. And to get the bike, if they approved it, it would come as is. I mean, very, very plain, very stripped down. They eliminated the fender trim. They eliminated any chrome option that you might have. They even came with synthetic tires. There's a lack of rubber. The grips were plastic. The kicker pedal was even plastic. They eliminated the rubber parts on that. The rubber footboards from the early 40s, they put steel in. So it was a very plain, simple bike that was basically your essential transportation. It was the bottom of the line, utility machine at the time. Very few of them survived. In fact, very few survived because there was very few produced. Very few people could meet the criteria to purchase one.
Fearing that American riders might at last desert the V-twin, in 1949, Indian abandoned the mighty Chief and decided that the future was in European-style lightweight motorcycles. The bike suffered from a lack of development, poor quality, and didn't sell. The Chief returned briefly in the early 50s, but by then, Indian had lost their customer loyalty to Harley.
Harley, what they did is they introduced an aluminum head with hydraulic lifters, eliminated probably 250 pieces that they didn't have to manufacture. Just a very simplified, very efficient type of a valve mechanism. They did it for the public's sake. It was a cleaner, quieter motor, and they did it from their own manufacturing standpoint, less parts. Styling was unchanged from 1936. So you bought this bike in 1948, you had a bike that pretty much essentially looked like it did in 1936.
The Harley Cowboys had beaten the Indians, and from now on they would ride the range alone. By 1949, lavish color and chrome reflected the optimism of the times.
It was a boom time, and these were the perfect way to express yourself. Well, I can imagine a guy fighting 4 years in the trenches or whatever, just fighting 4 years to get out and own a motorcycle. He was probably in heaven.
There's a new out-of-the-world Harley-Davidson for every rider. A soft riding, slick riding, years ahead Harley-Davidson for every purpose. Here's the baby that will put you on top and out front wherever you ride. 74 cubic inches of motion-packed power.
As the 50s came to a close, Harley looked forward to the space age of the 60s. But while men prepared to orbit the Earth, Harley's shiny Goliath still thumped along the highways of America. H.O.G, the affectionate name given to the Harley, does not refer to the grunting rumble of the V-twin. The letters stand for Harley Owners Group. The Vietnam War veterans are a club with a binding icon, the Harley-Davidson.
We're very patriotic. When they came back, the most patriotic thing you could do is keep your beliefs in America, buy an American motorcycle, and that's pretty much how it formed. At least 90% of the club is Harley-Davidson. That we are all brothers. We've all been through the same thing. We've all shared the same pains and emotions and highs throughout Vietnam.
The bottom end of this motorcycle is the panhead bottom end, and they changed from panhead to a shovel head. And this is the motor that they come up with. This is about 4 years they made this motor. And it's a 4-speed and has some real long legs. It's got a 26-tooth gear on the transmission, so it just rides forever. I have to do something really stupid to blow this up. It doesn't have a tack. There's no frills. There's no nothing. It's my scoot, and it's like no other, and it's mine.
Okay, the back obviously tells what we are. In memory of the brothers lost is the color black, and the red is the bloodshed. The eagle is, of course, America over the flag, or over the map of Vietnam. This one here is quite obvious, dedicated to the memory of all the brothers in Vietnam, the brothers lost and missing, still missing. Everything else on the front, these are rally patches that tell different rallies and different parties that I've been to. See, this one was up in Maine. Wow, where was this one? Good party.
After one takeover, a management buyback, and with the help of government import restrictions, the Harley is still with us. Today, retro styling hides modern comforts like rubber-mounted engines and suspension. Like Coca-Cola and Levi jeans, the Harley-Davidson remains a quintessentially American product.
Further down the line.
Classic Motorcycles by Gary Johnston is in the shops now, priced £16.99. And next Sunday at 8, classic British bikes, Triumph, Norton, Francis Barnett.